the key again is to recognize, is it a pattern?
Yeah.
Is it serving me to my highest level? Because if it is, right, you have a pattern that I detected from you in our conversations is working out, right? Even on your way here to the ranch, you stopped off to work out. So that's your pattern. You go, okay, am I in a pattern? Yes. Is it serving to my highest level? Yes.
Yeah.
Do more of it.
Yep.
Right? Other patterns. Is it serving me to my highest level? No. Okay, let's find something different. Let's course correct. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the TPM Show. If you see the smile on my face, it's because we're laughing, having a good time here at the TPM Ranch. And once again, we've got Coach Chris back with us. Chris, thanks for being here, brother.
Doug, thanks for having me back again. I thought I was going to get fired after the first one. So.
No, it's been great. And I'm sure what a lot of guys can tell when we have fun. I mean, I think I've emphasized this a lot on these last few episodes, but it's just real men getting together. And that really resonated me when we did the Alpha Rising, the event we did here just a couple weeks ago. It's just great guys. I always say with TPM, we don't attract assholes because really good guys don't invest money and time to bettering themselves in their relationships. They don't. They go do something else and they spend their money elsewhere and their time elsewhere. So appreciate the time we get to share with you and drop some knowledge. And once again, we were talking about something off camera and we thought, hey, let's just share this with the men.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we were talking about kind of the storms we go through in life and the trauma that we can collect with that. And that we really, as men, we tend to stuff it because we were told to do that. So which is a small child, don't cry, be tough, right? And then next thing you know, we have all this stuff built inside of us and we're in these intimate relationships and all of a sudden we're not showing up the best way we can because we can only mask that stuff for so long and we get triggered and it kind of comes out in an ugly way. And I saw that personally for myself. Like I dealt with that a lot. I grew up pretty unique when it came to, I had a father that was absent, didn't have him around. My mother was married 4 or 5 times. And so I built a lot of resentment from abandonment and all these things. And I brought all of that crap with me into my relationship. And the work I did with you guys really opened me up to how I wasn't showing up. But there's also the work that I needed to do to unfold, to kind of pull that out and release that and not hold on to those old childhood feelings and things.
I'm with you 100%. And one thing I always like to do when this comes up, and I think it's my own issue, but define what trauma means. What is, because it's become such a buzzword, right? Kind of like being triggered does. What does trauma mean to you?
It's some fear that I'm holding in.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fear. It's always fear-based at some level, right? It may not be a fear that you're exposed to right now, but you're still holding on to that. It still lives inside of you. You know, if you were abandoned or you didn't have that love and emotional support that you needed, you still fear that. And even if that relationship doesn't show that, it's still a part of you. And so you can spend that time and energy to dive into that and release that and understand that that's who you were, but that's not who this person is, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm with you 100%. Sometimes I joke with the guys, like when they come to the ranch, I go, hey, bring this, bring that, but leave your baggage behind, right?
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to bring all your baggage in here, but we do. We bring all of our baggage into a relationship. And then when we go from one relationship to the next, then we bring that same baggage to that new relationship if we haven't dealt with it. And that's why you will find, or at least for me, when I look back at the relationships I had before I got married, right? What was the constant and why those relationships didn't work? Oh, it's me. I look back at the women, and hindsight's 20/20, of course. I'm like, oh, she was amazing. She was amazing. She was amazing. All of these things, but it didn't work out for whatever reason. Now, I left every one of those relationships, but I left it because of my trauma, right? Oh, I don't want them to get too close, or
self-sabotage.
Oh yeah. So I would bail for, I'll leave before you leave me, like that kind of thing.
A little layer of protection there for Doug.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I brought it into my marriage, right? Like I was the one that left, right? So that, for my story, and the guys that have heard my story before, I left for a month. That was down in San Diego. And, I'm sure we don't have to get into the details of that, but it was those things. Until you deal with them, they're going to come up time and time again. And a lot of times, most of us, certainly me, I was one of them, we aren't aware of it when we're in it.
No, I mean, a great example, I was in my first 10 years of marriage was I was so emotionally disconnected because I built this wall of protection, this armor on me, because what I was in my childhood, I had to do that to protect myself as a child. But I did not recognize that I was wearing this armor that wasn't serving me anymore, right? And it was really causing huge friction because she needed a much more in-depth emotional connection. And I would be like giving her breadcrumbing her just enough, but not to let her in because I'm protecting my heart because of that, what I dealt with.
We talk about TPM, we talk about the stick man, the I am, and different things, which get a little bit more shadow work until the advanced concepts that we'll teach some of the men. And there's layers to that game, right? As guys go in the brotherhood inner circle, the game gets raised and elevated to what we go into. But unless we've been introduced to that level, and I'm going to guess most of our listeners have no idea what we're talking about here, what it is it's the way that we show up when we're not the best version of ourselves, right? That trauma triggers a response mechanism within inside of us that says, okay, this is what I need to do to deal with this. For me, exiting the relationship. For you, putting up the shield, right? And I have that shield too. Like we have, all of us have all kinds of we're like the most amazing Iron Man forts in the world, right? Defenses coming up everywhere. Some guys use their wit, their intelligence. Some guys sleep around, all kinds of things to protect their identity.
Yeah, that's it. And then, this mental health awareness, right? We weren't, at least I was never raised to be like, oh, you might be dealing with something, you should go talk to somebody. Yeah. Right? No we as boys, we're never told that. You just deal with it. Like, don't cry,
Stiff upper lip.
Stiff upper lip, right?
Put some dirt on it, Chris.
Yeah. And I think that needs to change, right? I think that I have two girls and it's different than that, but they're going to be aware that they're going to have that mental awareness of just going out and making sure you're talking. Have them in counseling, having these open conversations and know that this is stuff that we need to deal with when we're younger and just carry that through our lives. It's just like going to the doctor to get your checkup. Our brains need the same thing.
I think it is changing to a degree. Maybe it's just the circles I hang out with, I mean, I do send I have sent my kids to private schools, like a Waldorf or, something deliberately. My son's very, I don't want to throw my son under the bus. My son's a much more emotional kid than my daughter, who's younger. She's a little Viking. Like when you meet her, she just wants to tear stuff up. But I think it is changing a little bit in our society. But that doesn't help us men in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, or beyond with how we deal with things. I think it could have been socially acceptable to go talk to someone, but there's a stigma behind that, right? If you go talk to someone or you join a group like the Powerful Man or you do something, then there's something wrong with you. And that's a character issue. And that's a hard thing to get over when someone says, there's a difference between I have a problem and I am the problem, right?
Yeah. And I think for a long time we try to avoid thinking that we're the problem. Like,
sure,
that those layers of protections and those stories are just part of that to keep us from really identifying and knowing. We all probably know we need to do the work, but it's hard to step in that space to recognize that, okay, it's time. Let's be honest, that shadow work is the hardest work we do.
Yeah. It reminds me, so I tore my rotator cuff again, so I can't work. I was just getting back into working out. And of course I went to Prague and I used it as an excuse to drink more than I should, eat more pizza. I'm eating the kids, dinosaur nuggets. I'm doing all the things and I'm gaining weight. And I go to my physical therapist and I hadn't seen her in like 3 weeks. And she's like, how's your shoulder? We're going through. I'm like, yeah, I got a little bit of range of motion back. I go, the issue is my thyroid. I keep gaining weight. It's not the pizza and beer. It's got to be my thyroid. I heard she had the same reaction. She's knows me now to know that I'm very, very cynical and sarcastic and joking around. But it's like we blame our problems on something external. I'm not the problem. It's my thyroid gland. It has to be why I'm gaining weight. It's not the beer and pizza Doug's eating because I'm using it as an excuse. because that couldn't make me gain weight. It's the thyroid issue. It's beyond my control.
It's not that I'm not emotionally responsive. It's because they're too needy.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's the issue. I better get out of this relationship.
Yeah.
She's not good enough for me.
Yeah.
I'm moving on. So she won't hurt me when I figure out that I do want to be in this relationship. So we got to figure out, what is the trauma? How do we figure out what's going on in this situation?
Well, this is something we, in the programs we do so well, is that first you need to have time alone.
Yeah.
You got to turn the noise off of this world. And we don't do that, because anytime we're alone, we have our headphones on, we're on our phones, we're on our computers. We may not be at work, but we're still at work. When do we have time to sit in quiet and just feel what's going on in our bodies and our minds? And when it comes up, let's not be afraid to dive into it. Don't turn it off. When it comes up, the emotions come, we need to cry as men. We need to release. And that's one thing crying was, as I was raised, was a weakness. And what I realized is that when those tears come up, you let those tears flow, because that's a release of something you need to deal with. So you have to be in a space where there's quiet, where you can hear yourself.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to throw out an alternative, or from my perspective, when I'm working with men, I ask very simple questions, and I'm sure I've talked to you about this. If I go, hey, when someone complain, do you have a complaint? Yes, no. Yeah, here's my complaint. My wife's doing X, Y, Z. Okay, cool. Is this a pattern? Yes. Is it serving you to the highest level? No. Okay, there's something in here that's causing this pattern to repeat. And of course, it's your wife's fault. Of course, she's crazy. Of course, if she only got better and realized how amazing you were. But besides that, where are you contributing to this pattern, right? Where's that coming up? Or what happened? What happens inside of you? How do you react when this happens? And what's that? That's how you can identify that triggering moment. And if it's a similar thing, then that actual trauma, that pattern is inside you. Maybe it's inside your wife too, because we tend to marry somebody who is really good at playing with our triggers and is a good teacher. But is that pattern inside of you? And if it's happened more and more, that's when you know there's a deep-seated trauma. And use that, and for some reason I don't like that word, but there's a deep-seated trauma that needs to be investigated so it can be released.
Yeah, and I also think it's really difficult to sometimes identify by yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you have the quiet time, you're doing that, it's still really, sometimes it takes that other person to kind of help identify that. If it's a professional, or start listening to what other people, your loved ones, are saying around you, and which is sometimes hard.
Yeah. Well, it's often hard.
Yeah.
Right? Because are they judging me?
Yeah.
Right? Or is it true? Or they don't know are they attacking me?
Yeah.
And if that is your trauma experience as a young age, or whenever that happened, it's just further stacking the evidence that this is reality, right? When it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. And don't fall back to do the flight, the fight, the freeze, because that's what we naturally do, right? That layers of protection is going to put us there. We have to be able to be conscious of that to be able to understand what is actually being said at that moment, you know?
Oh, that's interesting. What just came up, I was thinking about my patterns, and my natural reactions fight, but when it's with women, I can't fight. So I flee, I run, or I had in the past.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So, okay. So a guy's going, okay, I'm going to do the solitude thing. I'm going to get some time by myself. And I got to ask these guys here, and you know this answer, Chris, but when's the last time you didn't have your cell phone for 3 days? Right?
You guys took it away in the UK, in Wales.
Shh. So when's the last time? Some guys, they go hunting and they're out of range or what have you, but they're usually not by themselves.
Yeah.
When's the last time you were by yourself, no cell phone, no books, just you by yourself for 3 days? That's what alone time is, you know? And you got to imagine throughout history, we were alone a lot, right? A lot of thinking time happened, but we're not now. Now we're distracted. If you're not on TikTok, you're on Instagram or Facebook. If you're not on social media, you're on something else. I can't tell you how many times a guy goes, well, I haven't had TV for 3 years. And they're proud. Like, yeah, wow, dude, you haven't had TV for 3 years. And the next thing you know, they're telling me about Netflix. I'm like, dude, that's the same thing. Just because you don't have like ABC, you're not paying for that on your TV.
Yeah.
If you're binging Netflix, bro, it's the same deal. They're distractions. And they're not bad. per se. It's just what we use those distractions for.
Yeah, and there's more distractions now than ever before.
Oh, no
and they're
doubt.
so much more accessible. So that's the other part, is having the discipline to do that is really challenging.
When you're connected, we were just inside the main house a second ago, and I was on my phone messaging people through an app, getting stuff done in between a pee break. We are that connected, or the ability to be that connected, which is great in a lot of ways. But if we're trying to identify trauma or sticking points in our lives and our relationships, it could be used as a distraction.
Absolutely. Yeah. We use it all the time just to avoid having to do the work.
Yeah. And the excuse of being bored.
Yeah. And I think it's difficult because we all need to do it, but a lot of times we don't do it until shit hits the fan in our lives. And then we're forced into that space. Right. And so if we can be...
Hey guys, I wanted to interrupt this episode because it's dawned on me that many of you guys aren't aware that we actually have a book on how to save your marriage without talking about it. Now, thousands of men have read it, they've reviewed it, and I want to give you the opportunity to do the same. If you're interested in grabbing it, it's a short read, but it's helped a lot of men just like you. And maybe you're not interested in the activation method yet, but this is a small entry point that can really turn things around for you. Go over on Amazon. We have it priced as cheap as Amazon will let us. And that way you have a resource that you can use right now to start getting some results in your marriage. Now let's get back to the episode.
More conscious of working through it before we burn the whole house down. Would be really convenient for ourselves, right?
It's like asking for directions before you're lost.
Exactly.
And it's an interesting thing. And what happens in my experience is when you surround men that are on this journey, you surround yourself around men around this journey, you start to enjoy peeling back the layers because you know what's on the other side of it. It's kind of like working out, right? After a while, you start to chase the soreness.
Yeah.
Right? You start working out, you start to kind of want to get sore. You kind of like the pain. It becomes a really sadistic, thing. But you actually enjoy the pain of the workout because you know what's on the other side of it. The endorphins, feeling better, looking better, being stronger, being more fit. That becomes the enjoyment of the workout, right? Whereas if you are just working out for your first time, all you have is the soreness to go on. That's not fun. But you need to get through that sore period.
Yeah, and you realize that when you start this work and you pull back that layer, all of a sudden you feel a little lighter, you feel a little better, right? And so you pull that next layer, I feel a little better, a little lighter, right? And I think I've told you the analogy of the buffalo energy, right?
Yeah.
Like the buffalo, when they see that storm on the horizon, they literally look at it and walk straight into it. And because they know they're going to get out of that storm quicker versus trying to walk around it, try to walk away from it because it's always going to catch up to you at some point. Yeah.
And it's going to be on you like a storm coming through. If you're going away from the storm, eventually the storm catches you. And if you keep going that direction, you're in the storm much, much longer. And that's what most people do.
Yeah. And when we get past that storm, that lightness comes, that happiness, because we dealt with what we need to deal with.
Yeah. Oh, I love that analogy. In fact, you have a buffalo necklace on.
Yeah.
Show the guys.
Yeah. I actually just got a tattoo of it too. Because truly from my past, I would run from those storms. I would hide from those. And it's just an amazing reminder this is a lesson that I need right now. Let's go into this, because on the other side of that, I'm going to fucking feel good.
Yeah. I mean, it's always about have that conversation, do that action, do it first. That applies to everything in life, business, relationships, right? It always is do the thing that comes up for you that you're a little bit scared to do. As one of my clients said, it makes my butt cheeks pucker a little bit. When you do it, I go, great. If that's what it is, then find those things that make your butt cheeks pucker, and that's what you're doing first.
Yep.
So just get those over, because you realize that usually it's the story we create around the thing, around the conversation, is 100 times worse than actually doing the thing.
Always. And the more time we wait, the bigger we make that story, and then it just makes it more difficult to step into it.
It is. There's a guy, I'm not going to give his name away, but we did a alpha reset in Florida around 2020. I did it with Mr. Peach, who we were talking about earlier, and a couple other guys. And the guys just arrived. And one of the guys sitting around the table made a big mistake. is he was telling stories and he was telling about an issue that he was having with a business partner. And this, and I got to have this conversation with, he's like, I got to talk to this guy and just get this resolved. And so, you know where this is going. I'm like, where's your phone? He goes, oh, it's right here. I'm like, cool. Go outside, make the call. Don't come back in until it's done. He's like, oh, what? It's the first time we met. Yeah, he's like, awesome. Well, who is this guy? He came in glowing ear to ear because he called the guy and said, hey, look, I got to talk to you about something. And the guy goes, thank God, I've been waiting for this conversation for like a year. Thank you so much for initiating it. And they ended up becoming, it was a difficult conversation. One guy he's like, hey, I'm doing more work. It was all these things that were going on, but they both knew the conversation needed to happen and both were scared. And he took the leadership of doing it. And this other guy he had the conversation with a friend. And the guy's like, thank you so much for doing this, because it was weighing on him too. And so we get to do those things, the trauma that we're carrying within us. We get to release that, and not only for ourselves, but that's first and foremost, but that has a ripple effect on our partners. And what gets me motivated to do it, Chris, when I don't want to do that extra little work, is I'm just going to pass it down to my kids.
Yes.
My kids are, the trauma that's in me is my trauma from my parents.
That's another podcast right there.
Oh, it's like 8 podcasts.
Yeah, that's a big one. So yeah, I think what I've recognized for myself is that when I get triggered, and if that, let's say you say something that pisses me off, but I don't address that, but it comes back in my mind 2, 3, 4 times. If I don't stuff it, I'm going to spend a tremendous amount of energy festering on that, right? And so I need, if it's hit me 3 times, I need to have that conversation. I need to be like, Doug, you're being an ass.
I know.
Yeah, you know what I mean, though. And that sometimes we do is we get in these loops of this negativity and these cycles, and it's usually caused by the trauma, maybe of that certain situation, right? It could be that small, but we can spend so much time and energy in that negative space that we just need to make the call.
Yeah. Just even about communication or trauma or whatever it is. Tim and I have an agreement that, mud on the glass. So we use the analogy that in a relationship, let's just say it's you and I, there's a pane of glass between us, and every little resentment is like a flick of mud on that glass. And sometimes when we want to brush it under or just laugh it off, it's really like kind of just wiping it with just your hand. It just smears more, right? And this happens in marriages. Yeah. There's a little flick on the glass, and eventually those little flicks over time, you can't see each other. And now you're in a relationship with somebody that you can't actually see the other individual. It's just a flick of mud that starts it. And, you need to really completely clean that glass.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And the nice thing is you have 100% control of cleaning that glass.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if they flick the mud or you flick the mud.
Yeah, and I think that's hard because that conversation is going to be difficult, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times for me, that Mr. Nice Guy in me, I didn't want to say something to make, especially my spouse, feel bad.
Yeah.
Right? But you don't, because you generally are trying to protect their emotions, right?
Yeah.
And so, but you realize how much damage you're doing by not having that conversation, especially a month down the road, 2 months, 6 months, a year,
We can all tell when we're around somebody who's resenting us or doesn't want to be with us.
Yeah.
And then we create a story about that, right? So that's even worse. And we're not protecting them. We're protecting ourselves.
Absolutely. 100%. Right?
Yeah. Because we want to look good, feel good, don't want to get rejected, don't want it to come back to us, don't want them to get angry with us, all of those things. I'll say that when I have those conversations, 9 times out of 10, 90% of the time, if not more, it's not nearly as bad as it was supposed to be. Or when people come to me and approach me and have to, hey, Doug, I need to talk to you. I have this with staff and people that we work with.
Yeah.
I need to talk to you. This thing you said, I'm like, dude, I didn't mean it that way. Like, I'm a smart ass. Like, I joke around all the time. And when I'm stressed, maybe my jokes just sound curt, but I'm still trying to keep it light. And then they'll go, oh, I didn't know you didn't mean it. I made it mean this. Like, no, dude, it was something totally different. And then we get to walk away. Sometimes there's tears, but sometimes we usually walk away closer than we did before.
Yeah, I agree. Anytime I've had that, it's always been a little easier conversation. And the whole reason why I didn't want to have it was generally some kind of trauma or hurt that I was holding on to that had maybe nothing to even do with that situation. It was just those layers of protection.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't do this, but I have a tendency to make up stories around those things.
Oh, man. Yeah.
No, I'm the only one, Chris.
It's the invisible fight.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And like you said, when our traumas come up, that's a big thing. You know, I have a story of abandonment. My parents separated when I was 4, divorced when I was 5, and I was between houses, and sometimes I was allowed into one house, but not allowed. It was a weird situation. And so I carry that in, right? You know, before Sprinter vans were a big deal, I had a Sprinter van with all my stuff in it. I still had a place to live, but I wanted all my stuff in that Sprinter van, right? Because I was in between houses, and I always was missing, as a kid, a stuffed animal or a toy. Yeah. So when my wife and I would travel, she's like, "Why are you bringing all this stuff?" I'm like, "It's my trauma. You know, I need all this stuff with me."
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth. No matter how we are raised, nobody comes out of that without something.
No, right? No doubt about it.
No matter how good of life it was, there's something that you're going to have to handle and deal with. And it's just part of our development and our growth. And
my parents were too good, right? Or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
They treated me too nicely. My mom was so great to me. Now, how can my wife ever live up to her?
Yep.
Or whatever else it may be. The key, again, is to recognize, is it a pattern?
Yeah.
Is it serving me to my highest level? Because if it is, right, you have a pattern that I detected from you in our conversations is working out. Right? Even on your way here to the ranch, you stopped off to work out. So that's your pattern. You go, okay, am I in a pattern? Yes. Is it serving to my highest level? Yes.
Yeah.
Do more of it.
Yep.
Right? Other patterns. Is it serving me to my highest level? No. Okay, let's find something different. Let's course correct.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've recently found out I was ADHD, and which made so much sense of these patterns in my life, right? And with that, there's this constant need for the dopamine addiction, right? And I had to course correct it. I found out that when I was doing that, you have to find those things that serve you, because it's very easy in those circumstances to find things that don't serve you.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're addicted to something that's serving you and helping you, and you're not overdoing it, then it's a beautiful thing, but it can very easily go the other way.
Oh, for sure. It's also funny because I think I got to imagine 80% of the people I hang out with or know would be diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah, especially business owners.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we have multiple business owners, right?
Yeah.
Because having one's not enough. They start 6 of them.
We all have to have at least 6 LLCs.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's another podcast in itself. So let's give these guys, so we've talked about, hey, be alone, right? Fill your cup. Look at it. Is this a pattern or not? Surround yourself by like-minded men. You mentioned getting professional help because you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yep.
Is there anything else a guy could do coming off of this? He's recognizing what you're talking about, going, hey, this is an issue in my marriage or issue in my life, and it's something I want to address.
What you just said are huge steps. Like, you do those, you're going to start making some huge things. I can't think of anything off the hand, but those are really, those 4 or 5 you just gave down are pretty solid.
I think just like sport, baseball, what have you, basketball, stick to the basics. You got to do the basics first, right? You don't have to do a 360 tomahawk, dunk if you can't dribble the basketball.
Yeah, you don't have to go to Brazil and go have a ayahuasca thing. Like, it can start way before that.
It should start way before. As someone who's been there, been there, done that. You can have all of those experiences without that experience, but it requires you to do the work, right? Again, I've done ayahuasca a number of times. And part of the allure of people I've done it with, I've seen, is they want that ayahuasca to do it for them, do it to them. They're not looking at it as an adjunct exploration, which I think is a mistake. But you got to do your fundamental work, in my opinion, and deal with your trauma before you go do something like that.
And it's the same thing as when you see a counselor. Don't expect that counselor to fix it.
Yeah. So when you think about the trauma, think about hitting singles in baseball. Do the basics first. Don't try to leap it.
Yeah.
Like, I was always the guy that thought, I'll learn the system and I'll make it better before actually implementing the system. And that's why when we talk about becoming an activated man, which is really our acronym for a powerful man, it's really an activated man. That's why we have the activation method. It's a methodology to get you there. And it's the same thing with trauma. There's a methodology you can go through to help you deal with your trauma. And we just gave the guys 4 easy points, not easy, but 4 applicable points that they could go do.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of it. Try it. Just do this work. It's the most important work we do.
100%. And if you need motivation not to do it for yourself, look in your kids' eyes.
Yeah.
That's when you'll really get it. You'll realize a lot of the trauma you're carrying around is probably trauma your dad had or your mom had. And the thing I always tell the guys is the difference is you don't have the excuse. You now know. Your parents probably didn't know. And so who's going to do the work to stop that from your kids passing it on?
Yeah, that's definitely a podcast we should do is generational trauma.
We'll make it happen, brother.
Okay.
Thanks for being here, man. Always great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Gentlemen, as we always say in the moment of insight, take massive action. The reason I say that is because I was there where I'd go from one podcast or one YouTube show to another. Maybe you're out running, maybe you're doing yard work, maybe you're just driving or you're in your car. But take some time, pause this episode, save it, come back to it. Listen to the tools that Chris has given you firsthand. It's from his experience. He's in the trenches and he's actually still doing the work just like I am and just like you are, but one step ahead. So take that information and apply it to your life, but take action, do something. Do yourself a favor. I know from the statistics on how many people watch this show or listen to it, that only probably 1 or 2% of you will actually take massive action because I get the feedback. Be in the top 1 to 2% because you deserve more than average, and I want that for you. We'll see you next time on the TPM Show.